Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. I've been making these college football fantasy draft videos for 2018. I've done the ACC and the SEC. I don't have time to do that today, however, but I do want to discuss something that I'm reading a lot on social media and on other YouTube channels. And so I do want to give some credit out there to some of the other sports YouTubers, college football YouTubers in particular, who are discussing this. But I always like to keep my finger on the pulse of what people are talking about in the college football world. Now, I have made a video on this in the past, last football season. And this is a subject that when you bring it up, you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different opinions on the way these things should work. And that subject is the possible expansion of the college football playoff. Now, what makes this subject so difficult to discuss is just pure numbers alone. The fact is 132 NCAA teams in college football as opposed to the NFL that has only 32 teams, and it's very cut and dry in the NFL. I mean, listen, you've got, you win your division, you get in the playoffs, and then they have wild cards. It's very simple, and the wild cards are based on actual records, so it's not subjective at all. You simply cannot do that in college football, like I said before, because of the numbers. There's too many teams. So what's fair? You know, we had the BCS system for I don't know how many years. It actually wasn't that long, but I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in the history of college football, the BCS was a very short time. But that was a very flawed system. Everyone was crying for a playoff during that time. I mean, what you had is a computer system picking the two best teams in the country and deciding who's going to play in the national championship game. So, getting down to the problem itself and how to fix it. Now, I personally like the 4-team system much better than the BCS system. Is it perfect? Probably not. Will there ever be a platform that's perfect? Probably not. So the question is, do you go to a 6-team playoff? Do you go to an 8-team playoff? Do you go to a 10, 12, 16, some people say? I mean, there's lots of different ways to look at this and ways to do it. I did happen to see on, I don't normally mention other YouTubers on my channel, just out of respect for them. But I did see on Mark Rogers TV the other day, he was discussing this, and he had a pretty good outlook on it for the 8-team system, where you put the 5 major conference champions in, and then either have 3, wild cards, or one group of 5, the best group of 5 team in the country gets in, and then 2 wild cards. That's not a bad system. Where you run into the problem with any of these playoff expansion ideas is the length of the season, because they're college kids. They shouldn't be playing an NFL schedule. They shouldn't be playing that many games. My personal opinion, and this is well known, is that you've got to get rid of these cupcake games. And then people say, oh, well, you can't do that, because, these smaller schools, whether they're a group of 5 team or an FCS team, they rely on the revenue from playing these major programs to support their entire athletic department. And I agree with that. But here's the thing. There's other ways to supplement that without actually playing the game. How about all the group of 5 teams, how about all of the Power 5 teams, rather, instead of paying them to play them just to beat up on them, in a meaningless game that nobody watches, really, or cares about anyway. Just throw, all the Power 5 teams throw a bunch of money, a set amount of money in the pot at the beginning of the year, and they just divvy those up against the FCS teams, and then that can take care of that. There's no reason to actually play the game, because you're not generating any revenue off the game in the first place. So that takes care of that. Now what do? So you take 2 cupcakes out of every Power 5 schedule, right? So now you're down to 10 games a season. That's all you really need for the regular season. This extends the bowl period or the playoff period. This allows you 2 more possible playoff games during the season, to still stay within that gap of finishing around New Year's. Now with the 6-game platform that I advocate for, what you could have is either the 5 conference champions and 1 at-large team, the 5 conference champions and a group of 5 team, or you could do the same way they do it now with the playoff committee and just pick the so-called best 6 teams in the country. My preference personally would be the 5 conference champions and 1 at-large team, not necessarily a group of 5 team. It could be a group of 5 team. Now, let's put it this way. So last year, it would have been the 4 that were in there, and then probably Ohio State, because they were the one that was 1 out from getting in, and then UCF, because they were undefeated. So it's not guaranteed that a group of 5 team is going to get in there, but if there's a group of 5 team that's undefeated and 13-0 going into there, then they're more than likely going to get in based on that system. I'm not totally opposed to the 8-team system like Mark Rogers was talking about. There's ways to do that too. If you do that, I still am an advocate for shortening the regular season to 10 games and getting rid of the cupcake games altogether, and so you can play more playoff games. There may be some teams that don't have to play 15 games necessarily, like Alabama didn't last year because they didn't win their conference, so they only played 14 games, yet they still won the national title. But there will be teams that will have to play 15, 16, 17 games even. They have to play their full schedule, plus their conference game, plus multiple playoff games. Now, the 6-game system like I had, you could even still have a bye week for the top 2 seeds. So you'd have the seeds number 3 through 6 play, and then go down from there. And the first seeds 1 and 2 would have a bye, so they would have the advantage there. That's the advantage of being the 1st and 2nd seed. Same thing with the 8-team system. When you get up to 10, 12, 16 games, I think that's too many, because I don't see any way possible that the 16th seed last year, if there would have been a 16-team playoff, there's no way that they were going to win the national title. I mean, is it a 0% chance? No, there's never a 0% chance of anything. But the chances of it are very, very unlikely. Games probably would have been bad. And we don't want to watch bad football just to be fair and get more teams in there. There was one really interesting scenario that I saw somebody bring up. It probably would be rejected by most people, but if you could think outside of the box for a second, it's not a bad idea. So what you would do, whether it's a 6 or 8 team playoff, get rid of divisions in Power 5 football. Divisions are a fairly new thing. We didn't have divisions 50 years ago, 40 years ago. I don't even know. Somebody can post on here when they started dividing these conferences into divisions. We don't need divisions in Power 5 football. Conferences, yes, maybe. Divisions, no. So I would be in favor for eliminating divisions altogether. You take the 2 teams with the best record in their conference, and they play for the conference championship. And then that conference championship gets an automatic bid into the playoff. So you don't have to play the same teams every single year. Yeah, you might still play whoever your current division rival is. Like for Clemson, they'd still play Florida State every year because that's a rival, and it's a big game that's going to generate revenue and attract the eyes of people from all over the country. Same with like Georgia and Florida or something like that. You get what I'm saying here. But we don't have to play the same teams over and over and over again. And it would actually be more interesting for Clemson to, say, play Virginia Tech every 2 years rather than every 4 or 5 years or 6 years or whatever it is. Every team would play 8 conference games, 1 non-conference game, and then whatever their last game of the year is, in-state rival or equivalent of whatever their in-state rival is, to equal 10 games. And the last point I'll make here is the fact that we're not going to see any expansion until this current 4-team system that we have now, the TV contracts are up in a few years from now. I think they did a 10-year contract, right? And we're 4 years in. It's going to be another 5 or 6 years before anybody even entertains the idea of expanding the playoffs because of the money involved in the contracts, and it's just too sticky of a situation. I do think there will eventually be an expansion. But seeing it here in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I think is highly doubtful. So let's just be happy with the 4-team system right now. Let's be honest here. The playoffs, well, not all the playoff games, but certainly the national championship games, 3 out of the last 4 years, the 4 years of the playoffs have been really, really good. The 2 Clemson-Alabama games were awesome. The game last year was awesome. So there's lots of different ways to do it. There's not a right or wrong answer. I mean, it's strictly people's opinion, and there's lots of ways to do it. Anyway, I'm done ranting about that. Let me know your opinion on this, and I'm sure that I'll get 10 different comments with 10 different scenarios. Some people may agree, some people may disagree, and that's the way this thing's going to go until the end of time. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete, checking out.